Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, September 15th, 2025. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thank you for joining us. President Trump announced he is sending the National Guard into Memphis, Tennessee to combat crime. He said the deployment will be similar to the one in Washington, D.C. We'll hear him talk about that coming up. He also had more reaction to the death of Turning Point USA CEO Charlie Kirk. Now, Vice President Vance hosted Charlie Kirk's daily radio show today. He said one of the ways he'll honor his friend is by being a better husband and father. He spent the show talking about his relationship with them, and he spoke to White House staffers about their relationships. We'll hear from the Vice President also coming up. We're about 2 weeks away from a possible government shutdown. House Republican leadership says it will put a temporary funding bill on the floor this week, where Republicans can pass a funding bill on their own. That's on the House of Representatives, but that's not the case in the Senate, where Democratic leader Chuck Schumer has said that any funding deal that doesn't include health care insurance, tax credits, is a deal breaker. Meanwhile, the White House, who has stayed in the background, says they will get more involved if they need to. We'll hear from Senators Thune and Schumer coming up. Well, we begin in the Oval Office and the president's announcement about Memphis.
The task force will be a replica, as I said, and it's going to be, I think, equally successful. This is a tremendous success we've had in Washington, I can tell you, and everyone knows it. And people in the White House that work here and other people that I know are calling me and thanking me. They're going out to dinners. They're doing things that they haven't done in years. The effort will include the National Guard as well as the FBI, ATF, DEA, ICE, Homeland Security investigations, and the U.S. Marshals, and more along the prosecutors. We're going to have DOJ led by U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee, who is here or not here? Who's that person here? That person is going to be very busy. So we're going to have U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee, and most importantly, Pam Bondi's here. She's heading it up, and she's doing an unbelievable job in every respect beyond this. So also worked with some of the members of the team right here on D.C., and we're very proud of that effort. We essentially had the crime down to a very low rate in 12 days, and within another 10 days after that, it was so incredible. And it continues at that level, and we're going to continue. We have to, because it's our capital. This team will deploy the full powers of federal law enforcement agencies and enforcement generally to restore public safety and get dangerous career criminals off of our streets. We're going to get them off. In 2024, Memphis had the highest violent crime rate, the highest property crime rate, and the third highest murder rate of any city in the nation. Other than that, they're doing quite well, thank you.
He was also asked about the suspect in the murder of Charlie Kirk.
Your FBI is investigating the potential role of left-wing organizations in the assassination. I'm wondering if you think if Charlie Kirk's assassin worked alone or if he worked with him.
I don't know. I mean, I can tell you he didn't work alone on the internet, because it seems that he became radicalized on the internet. That's just by watching the same things that you're watching and hearing. It looks like he became radicalized over the internet, and it seems like he has wonderful parents, brought in a wonderful neighborhood, smart guy, great boards, great marks, great student. And then something happened to him over a fairly short period of time. It looks like he was radicalized over the internet, and it's radicalized on the left. He's a left. I have a lot of problems with the left, and they get protected, and they shouldn't be protected. But as you understand, I think, very well from the tone of your question. Thank you very much.
Now, the president also said he'll be going to Charlie Kirk's memorial service, which is scheduled for September 21st at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. He was also asked about his order to lower flags on federal buildings.
Mr. President, I want Charlie Kirk, in retrospect, given all of the moving ways that this White House has paid tribute to Charlie Kirk,
right,
do you think it would have been fitting to lower the flags to have staff when Melissa Hordman, the Minnesota House Speaker, was gunned down by an assassin as well?
I'm not familiar. The
Minnesota House Speaker, a Democrat, who was assassinated this summer.
Well, if the governor had asked me to do that, I would have done that. But the governor of Minnesota didn't ask me. I didn't I wouldn't have thought of that, but I would have if somebody had asked me. People make requests for the lowering of flag, and oftentimes you have to say no because it would be a lot of lowering. The flag would never be up. Had the governor of Minnesota asked me to do that, I would have done that gladly.
And given the killing of Melissa Hortman, the attack on Paul Pelosi, the attack on Gabby Giffords, the attack on the Pennsylvania governor's mansion, why make the case that violence is only on one side? It seems to be taking place.
I didn't say it's on one side, but I say the radical left causes tremendous violence, and they seem to do it in a bigger way. But the radical left really is caused a lot of problems for this country. I really think they hate our country.
Now, Tennessee Senators Marsha Blackburn and Roger Marshall, both Republicans, along with Governor Bill Lee, joined the president for the announcement on the National Guard into Memphis this afternoon. Tennessee Governor Lee said that he supports the move and that the National Guard will be working closely with other law enforcement agencies in the state. You can see all of the president's Oval Office announcement at cspan.org and the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. And we mentioned Vice President Vance hosted Charlie Kirk's radio show today. USA Today writing that his decision to host the show was a sign of Charlie Kirk's influence in the White House. Here's how the vice president began the program.
JD Vance here, live from my office in the White House complex and filling in for somebody who cannot be filled in for, but I'm going to try to do my best. My dear friend, the great Charlie Kirk. The last several days have been extremely hard for our country. They've been hard for me, hard for my family, hard for the countless people in this building who knew and loved Charlie Kirk. And of course, they've been hardest most of all for his darling wife, Erica, and their two beautiful children. The thing is, every single person in this building, we owe something to Charlie. He was a joyful warrior for our country. He loved America. He devoted himself tirelessly to making our country a better place. He was a critical part of getting Donald Trump elected as president, getting me elected as vice president. And so much of our success over the last 7 months is due to his efforts, his staffing, his support, and his friendship. I don't think that I'm alone in saying that Charlie was the smartest political operative I ever met. Everyone knew him as this fearless debater, this guy who would take the conservative message into hostile places and inspire younger generations to have courage. One thing that's hit a lot of those young Americans over the last week was how Charlie was there for them when others were not. When they were afraid to speak their minds, when they were afraid of what a professor would say, when they were afraid that they would be shouted down by their peers, Charlie was there, showing them that they could be courageous and that they could be bold. Charlie was a visionary. He was a luminary. He brought together people. He didn't just teach people how to speak. He didn't just teach people what to say. He didn't just teach people they could actually speak their mind on campus. He created a whole social network for an entire generation of young people. I know people who met their husband, who met their wife, who met the best man at their wedding at a TPUSA event. Because as you guys all know, it's not just about speaking our mind, it's about making friends along the way and creating that support network that won an election and that staffed the current federal government.
Reporting on the show, USA Today writes that White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller said Charlie Kirk volunteered his time to get into the weeds, the nitty-gritty of government, and that they discussed, quote, every executive order, every new regulation, every new policy plan. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said Charlie Kirk was the, quote, primary architect of his, quote, unification with Donald Trump. Now, tonight, House Speaker Mike Johnson is hosting a vigil for Charlie Kirk in the Capitol's Statuary Hall. We expect the Speaker and other House leaders to attend and speak. It is scheduled for 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be live on C-SPAN 3 and C-SPAN Now and cspan.org, where you can also watch it on demand. Tomorrow, President Trump is traveling to the United Kingdom for a rare second state visit. This comes from the invitation British Prime Minister Keir Starmer made at his Oval Office visit back in the first weeks of Trump's second administration. And since Buckingham Palace is undergoing renovations, much of the visit will take place at Windsor Castle. Now, according to a schedule released by Buckingham Palace, when the President and First Lady Melania Trump arrive at the grounds of Windsor Castle, they'll be greeted by Prince William and Princess Catherine. From there, they'll meet King Charles and Queen Camilla as a royal salute is fired from from the Windsor Castle lawn. Then they'll board carriages and proceed through the Windsor estate toward the castle with horses and riders alongside the military bands lining the route. Now, earlier this morning on C-SPAN, Taylor Poplar, Spectrum News national political reporter, talked about the visit.
So initially, this trip was meant to be more of a celebratory one. King Charles took a very unprecedented step, but also something that totally caters into what President Trump likes, and invited the president back for what is a second official state visit. President Trump is the first president, at least in recent history, first U.S. president to get 2 official state visits to the UK. So he's going to head to meet with King Charles. He's going to get kind of the full trappings of a state visit, a lot of pomp and circumstance. But then we know he's also going to be meeting with the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, going to continue everything from trade talks to negotiations about trying to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. So a bit of glitz and flair for the first part of the trip, and then a bit more business in the second part of the trip. But the president is slated to leave tomorrow morning for that.
Is it designed to highlight what's been known historically as the special relationship we have with the United Kingdom?
100%. And I think the folks in the UK, the leadership, they know what President Trump likes. He enjoys these big kind of royal visits. He loves interacting with monarchs around the country. He loves taking part in kind of glitzy ceremonies. And that often opens the door and paves the way for more fruitful negotiations on policy topics that can be a bit more tense. So both King Charles and Prime Minister Starmer have recognized that they have a good relationship with the president, and they're hoping this will help continue kind of, progressing that moving forward.
Taylor Poplar, Spectrum News national political reporter on this morning's Washington Journal. Now to the talks to keep the government open and funded past the end of the month. As we mentioned, House Republicans can pass any funding bill on the floor on their own, but they need Democratic support in the Senate. Senate Republican leader John Thune said this afternoon he plans to put forth a so-called clean continuing resolution that keeps the government open until mid-November. In his Leader Time remarks, he talked about Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer's past comments about previous government funding resolutions.
Mr. President, during a funding debate in 2023, the Democrat leader had this to say, and I quote, "If we are going to keep the lights on beyond this Friday, our Republican colleagues will have to work with Democrats in a bipartisan way to pass a clean extension," end quote. To pass a clean extension. Well, Mr. President, that's exactly what we're offering Democrats, a clean extension. 2 years ago, that seems to have been the standard for CRs, according to the Democrat leader. But today? Well, today the Democrat leader is ready to hold the CR hostage and shut down the government over extraneous policy measures. It really is amazing, Mr. President, how the rules change for Democrats depending on their perceived political advantage. Although, again, Mr. President, it's hard to imagine what Democrats think they're going to gain from doing this. The Democrat leader is not the only Democrat who's spoken at length about the negative effects of a shutdown on the American people. Democrats' far-left base might be enthusiastic about a shutdown, but I don't think Democrats should expect a lot of thanks from mainstream voters, the very same voters that Democrats lost in the last election. Mr. President, I've spoken many times about my commitment to restoring regular order in the Senate, and in particular, regular order on appropriations bills. And we've made progress on that this year, passing a package of 3 bipartisan appropriations bills before the August state work period, the first time that has happened literally in years. And just last week, the House passed a motion to go to conference on that package. And I intend for the Senate to do the same, so that we can pass these bills into law. But we need more time to consider the 2026 bills, which is why we're considering this short-term continuing resolution. This short-term, clean, continuing resolution for just 7 weeks. This should be an easy bipartisan vote, Mr. President. And we should pass this bill in a bipartisan fashion and then get back to work on the fiscal year 2026 appropriations bills and the other essential work here in the Senate. Mr. President, I hope that Democrats will think better of their shutdown plans and join us.
Part of Senate Republican leader John Thune's Leader Time remarks. On his Leader Time remarks, Senator Schumer talked about how the president and Republicans have approached the government funding talks.
Now, to pass the CR in the Senate, as everyone knows, requires votes from both sides. If one side refuses to negotiate, they are the ones causing the shutdown. Because again, Democrats are happy to negotiate. We want to have a conversation with Donald Trump and Republicans about things we've been talking about for months, like health care, Medicaid, and the cost of living. And the American people know this. They know that if Donald Trump refuses to talk, even to talk with Democrats, it'll be him shutting things down. They know he needs to negotiate. They know he needs to compromise. He's not a dictator, much as he thinks he'd like to be. He needs to work with Democrats if he doesn't want to get blamed for shutting the government down. And if Republicans follow Donald Trump's orders not to even bother dealing with Democrats, they too will be putting our country on a path to a shutdown. And let me finish with this. I heard my friend, the Republican leader, come to the floor and cherry-pick some of my old quotes about keeping the government open with a CR. He zeroed in on the phrase clean extension. Well, the Republican leader glossed over the key point. I said in the past that Republican colleagues have to, quote, work with the Democrats in a bipartisan way, unquote, to extend government funding. I said they actually have to work with us, and it has to be bipartisan. That is not happening right now. It was happening then in 2023. That is the difference. And the majority leader conveniently forgets that extremely important point. And it's not happening right now because Donald Trump is shutting down any hopes of negotiation. Leader Thune wants to wonder what has changed. A lot, including Donald Trump's actions, which have dramatically harmed this country and undermined the appropriation process. He's canceled congressionally appropriated funding. He's redirected and stealing funds. Russell Vought says that he wants to see the appropriations process less bipartisan, and we know he's running the show. And now he says that Republicans shouldn't even bother to deal with Democrats. Meanwhile, the cost of people's health care has gone way up. Rural hospitals are already closing because of this big, beautiful bill. Job reports continue to show warning signs. Trump's tariffs are a mess, and the economy is headed in the wrong direction. That's all because of the choices Donald Trump has made as president. We need to have a negotiation, which is what we are asking for right now. Bipartisan, the only way you can get this done.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer on the floor earlier today. And we talked to Bloomberg Capitol Hill reporter Eric Wasson this morning on Washington Journal. He noted that Senator Schumer has taken a different approach to these negotiations than he did to the last government funding fight back in March.
You know, he's talking a lot tougher than he did even in March. The argument then was that Trump was at peak popularity with the tariffs and other concerns. Trump's popularity would be eroded, and there would be a chance for Democrats to really take on the president in a potential shutdown fight. It's just a hard argument for a congressional minority to make. If there is a clean funding bill, to go up and make that argument, it's a bit convoluted. It's a bit hard to make. Bernie Sanders was out there this weekend making the argument that Republicans would be the ones shutting down the government if they don't negotiate with Democrats. So really, once the shutdown begins, it's all bets are off. But in the past, the ones who were viewed as being the ones who caused the shutdown generally tend to have to back down.
And some late reporting this afternoon, Capitol Hill reporter Melanie Zanona saying today that House Speaker Mike Johnson said he's planning to attach extra money to the temporary government funding bill for member security. Politico's Meredith Lee Hill reporting that the House likely won't vote on a continuing resolution until Thursday or Friday. That sets up a possible Senate session over the weekend. Now, today on the House floor, members are considering legislation related to veterans and small businesses. Over in the Senate, members are voting on a resolution that would allow White House nominations to be approved in a group. That vote planned for 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, a procedural vote on the nomination of White House Council of Economic Advisors Chair Stephen Myron to serve on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. That is expected for 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time. The House live on C-SPAN, the Senate live on C-SPAN 2, and all of our congressional coverage on the app, C-SPAN Now, and the website, cspan.org. You're listening to Washington Today.
Coming up Tuesday morning on C-SPAN Radio at 9 a.m. Eastern, FBI Director Kash Patel testifies before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Again, Tuesday, 9 a.m. Eastern on C-SPAN Radio. Get all of our scheduled information online at cspan.org.
Welcome back to Washington Today. Illinois Democratic Governor JD Pritzker talked to reporters about how the Trump administration immigration actions in the Chicago area have affected residents there, but he also called out the president for his response to the death of Charlie Kirk.
Political violence has increased substantially against both Republicans and Democrats. Democracy is designed precisely to avoid political violence. And it's now incumbent upon leaders of all stripes to work together to stop it. Most especially, this should come from the top. Yet with each new crisis in recent years, we are reminded that we cannot rely on President Trump to tamp down the anger and the passion in the aftermath of political violence. Instead, he actively fans the flames of division, as he did on Friday, regularly advocates violence for political retribution, and in more than one case declares we are at war, not with a foreign adversary, but with each other. I don't believe any of that. Our people are not at war with one another. In these moments, real leaders offer words of solace and calm. Except for one, every president in my lifetime has done this in the wake of political violence. They take action for positive change. They bring people together. They make Americans feel safe. They let them know violence is never the answer. This is a watershed moment in our country. We can choose to stay silent and live in fear of more political violence, or we can choose to be loud for peace, for compassion, and for an America where people settle their political differences through free speech and at the ballot box. Let's be those people. That's the path Illinois chooses, and I implore the president to do the same.
Governor Pritzker was also asked if he thinks his criticism of the president is making the political climate worse.
Anyone who is fomenting attacks, anyone who is saying things that, especially in this moment, right, when we should have calm, when we should have someone at the top who is asking people to take a step back, anyone who's doing that deserves criticism. And I think it's incumbent upon me as the leader of this state to tell people that we need to act with calm in this moment, that people need to act peacefully in this moment.
You have called Republicans Nazis.
No, I have not. That is completely false. I have never called Republicans Nazis.
I'm glad you cleared that up because there are some...
Well, that's what they'd like to say. They're lying. They're lying.
I'm going to ask you to ask you that.
Well, that's not what I called them.
But are you as well, by not just calling out political violence and ending it, by you also criticizing, are you fomenting?
No. Look, we can be critical of one another. This is a democracy. We can be critical of one another. We can belong to different political parties and have different views and act in a peaceful fashion. I have always advocated that if one is to protest, they should protest peacefully. I've always advocated that you should speak out, use your megaphones, your microphones, stand on a soapbox to do so, go to the ballot box. Those are all the ways that in politics we act. That's the way I've always known that we act in political life in the United States. And yet now we see, that there are people who not only act violently, but those who encourage that kind of violence. And in this, especially in this moment, we should be asking people to instead call for calm. And that's what I'm doing. I think that's what our leaders should be doing across the board.
Illinois Democratic Governor JD Pritzker. You can see all of his comments at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Jerusalem earlier today, meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Prime Minister praised the Trump administration for its support of Israel's tactics in its ongoing war with Hamas, and he defended last week's airstrikes in Doha, Qatar. The two were asked about possible U.S. involvement in the airstrikes.
I've said repeatedly that Israel's decision to act against the Hamas terrorist leadership in Qatar was a wholly independent decision by Israel. It was a decision taken by me and our top security force chiefs. It was conducted by us, and we assumed full responsibility for it because we believe that terrorists should not be given a haven, and the people who planned the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust cannot have immunity. So we did it on our own, period.
All I would add is that we are focused on what happens now, what happens next, what role can Qatar play possibly in reaching an outcome here that leads not just to the end of this hostilities, not just to the release of all of the hostages, both living and deceased, not just the disarmament and elimination of Hamas, but also a better future for the people of Gaza, which isn't possible as long as Hamas exists, which isn't possible as long as 48 hostages are being held. And so we're going to continue to encourage Qatar to play a constructive role in that regard. We're focused because at the end of the day, no matter what has happened, these fundamentals still remain. There is still a Hamas, there is still 48 hostages, and there is still a war going on. And all of these things standing in the way of a better future for the people of Gaza and a peaceful end to what's happening now. So we're going to remain focused on what we can do next. We have strong relationships with our Gulf allies. We work very closely with them on a number of things. We've been engaged with them. We've been engaged with them consistently before what happened and after what happened. And ultimately, the point we will make to everybody is that some fundamentals still remain that have to be addressed, irrespective of what has occurred. The reality of it is we still have 48 hostages. We still have a Hamas that is not only holding 48 hostages, they're holding Gaza hostage, and they're using civilians as human shields. There's still a dangerous element, and as long as they exist, as long as they're around, there will be no peace in this region because they are not agents of peace, they are agents of barbarism. And it's still a fundamental fact that the people of Gaza deserve a better future, a future which is not possible until the hostages are all released and Hamas no longer exists. All these fundamentals still exist. They all still have to be addressed. And that's what we're going to remain focused on as we engage with our allies in the Gulf, is how can we continue to work together to address those three things which we think are pillars. Solving those are pillars of the broader construct I think all of us hope for the region.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Jerusalem this morning. A senior State Department official told CBS News that Secretary Rubio plans to go to Qatar today, then will go to the United Kingdom for President Trump's state visit. You can see all of Prime Minister Netanyahu and Secretary Rubio's comments at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. From Reuters, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced this morning that U.S. and Chinese negotiators have reached a framework deal on the social media platform TikTok. He spoke to reporters from Madrid.
We have a framework for a TikTok deal. The two leaders, President Trump and Party Chair Xi, will speak on Friday to complete the deal, but we do have a framework for a deal with TikTok. The getting to this framework was made possible by President Trump and the high regard that President Trump has for Party Chair Xi. So when the leaders have mutual respect, then the delegations have mutual respect. And as Ambassador Greer said, we were in substantial contact with President Trump last night and then again today. We had very good discussions. We preferred to keep the discussions on TikTok. We will be holding trade negotiations in about a month again at a different location. But we talked about many things that we might do in the future.
Reuters also reporting that China's lead trade negotiator, Li Chenggang, confirmed the deal and said that U.S. companies should not continue to suppress Chinese companies. The announcement came during the latest round of trade discussions between the U.S. and China. ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, has until September 17th to divest the platform's American business or potentially be shut down. CNBC is reporting that U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said today that the deadline may need to be pushed back to get the deal done, but there won't be any more extensions. From the Charlotte Observer, North Carolina Governor Josh Stein has requested an additional $13.5 billion from the federal government to help aid recovery in western North Carolina as the one-year anniversary of Hurricane Helene approaches. The Observer reporting the new request would go toward housing, small business, loans for local governments, and building roads. Governor Stein talked to reporters today. He was joined by members of the Governor's Advisory Council on Western North Carolina Recovery. That includes Asheville's Mayor, Esther Manheimer. She co-chairs the council. She spoke about the impact of the slow reimbursement of funding.
Recovery costs money, more money than any city or county in Western North Carolina can manage, even from a cash flow standpoint. We continue to work to recover, all while waiting for FEMA to reimburse us. And I will say as an aside, I know there's a lot of staff here from cities and counties, how much time it's taking out of our lives every day just to fight to be reimbursed for the funds that have already been allocated by Congress. We need to do other important recovery work rather than continuing to advocate for these vital reimbursements. I am grateful for the reimbursements that have come through, but the lag time makes it that much harder for us to do our jobs.
Governor Stein said he's headed here to D.C. this week to talk about recovery needs with federal officials. And from Esquire.com, at last night's Emmy Awards, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert took home the award for Outstanding Talk Series. It beat Jimmy Kimmel Live and The Daily Show. That was last year's winner. Of course, CBS announced in July that The Late Show will be canceled by next year. Now, last night, host Stephen Colbert accepted the award. He was surrounded by dozens of his colleagues and expressed gratitude to all of them. And he ended his speech with this.
10 years ago, in September of 2015, Spike Jones stopped by my office and said, "Hey, what do you want this show to be about?" And I said, Spike, I don't know how you could do it, but I'd kind of like to do a late night show, a late night comedy show that was about love. And I don't know if I ever figured that out, but at a certain point, and you can guess what that point was, I realized that in some ways we were doing a late night comedy show about loss. And that's related to love, because sometimes you only truly know how much you love something when you get a sense that you might be losing it. And 10 years later, in September of 2025, my friends, I have never loved my country more desperately. God bless America. Stay strong, be brave, and if the elevator tries to bring you down, go crazy and punch a higher floor. Woo!
Late Show host Stephen Colbert last night at the Emmys. Finally, more of our year-long series celebrating America 250. Today, the Jack Miller Center, just outside Philadelphia, hosted a discussion with historians to explore the ideas that sparked the American Revolution. University of Maryland history professor Holly Brewer talked about slavery and the Revolutionary War.
My paper for today begins by understanding that the principles of the revolution, all men are created equal and government based on the consent of the governed, were how they were compromised by the Treaty of Paris that ended the revolution. And that story is really fascinating. So by the time of 1783, slavery had been deeply established, and not just in the colonies, but across the empire. And in imperial high court decisions in England itself, so think about it as the equivalent of the U.S. Supreme Court vis-a-vis a state, had established that people who were aliens, who were not Christians, could be hereditary slaves and owned. And that was upheld also by parliamentary law, like the 1732 Debt Recovery Act. And so by the time of the revolution, this is deeply established, and the colonists were in a mercantilist system where the planters of Virginia, for example, had huge amounts of debts to British merchants. It's a kind of, you can almost think about it as a little bit of a debt peonage system. But when the Treaty of Paris was negotiated, this was something that many in England really wanted to protect, including the Crown, because the system of sending all these staple crops to England where they were heavily taxed by tariffs, think about it, was in fact really important to Crown revenue. About 25% of Crown revenue was coming from taxes on goods produced by slave labor. I'll repeat that. 25%, roughly, I've done the sums, of Crown revenue, that is the revenue of the entire kingdom, was coming from taxes on goods produced by slave labor. A big chunk of that was tobacco.
University of Maryland history professor Holly Brewer speaking earlier today at the Jack Miller Center, part of our America 250 coverage. You can find more at cspan.org and on the C-SPAN Now app. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast, and you can find it on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And one more note, beginning this fall, all 3 C-SPAN networks will be available on YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV. Our availability on these streaming platforms expands access to our unfiltered coverage of the U.S. government. We'll update you on when they'll be available and the launch date soon. And we want to thank you for watching and listening wherever you follow C-SPAN. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.